The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and a very good afternoon to all. I am Ravleen and on behalf of Care Ratings welcome you all to our live webinar on Indian sugar sector. We appreciate your time in joining us for this webinar. To take you further on this webinar, I would like to introduce you all to our speakers for today, Mr. Debal Mitra, Gaurav Dixit, and myself Ravleen Sethi. Debal is working with Care Ratings as director and has an industry experience of over 23 years. Gaurav Dixit is working with Care Ratings as Associate Director and has an industry experience of over 14 years. And I am working with Care Ratings as a Senior Manager, Large Corporate Ratings, and have an industry experience of over 10 years. I would like to inform the participants that the discussion will be in the form of a presentation, which will be visible on your screen. In case of any queries, may I request you all to please key in your questions in the slot provided. Our speakers would take the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. May I now request Debal to begin with the presentation.
Thank you, Ravleen, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome all of you to Care Ratings webinar on the Indian sugar sector. After posting record high sugar production for 2 consecutive years, led by higher acreage and crop yields in Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Karnataka, and with no major change in the consumption patterns, which remain stagnant at 25 to 26 million metric ton, the inventory levels spurred and stood at a record high at the start of the sugar season 2019-20 at 14.58 million metric ton. Owing to huge surpluses, sugar prices would have fallen below the cost of production and exerted pressure on the profitability of the sugar companies. The government, however, on its part, supported the industry through various measures, including regulating the minimum selling price or MSP of sugar, fixing the sugar sales quota, maintenance of buffer stock, extending of soft loans, export subsidies, higher ethanol pricing, and blending mandates. There have been mixed results of these initiatives, which are primarily stopgap arrangements. From a long-term perspective, in order to escape the sectoral cyclicality and to reinstate sustainable earnings for sugar companies, ensuring a vibrant ethanol policy is crucial to support all the stakeholders in the value chain. Furthermore, in the current scenario, given the current distillation capacities of the sugar mills and their limited impact on sugar production, continuation of the measures taken by the government to ease out the stress in the sector will be critical for the health of the sugar companies. In the webinar today, we will provide an overview of the sector along with global and domestic production, consumption, and price trends. We shall further walk you through the issues plaguing the industry and the steps taken by the government so far to support the sector. We shall also touch upon how COVID-19 may affect sugar supply chain and the global sugar prices, and how ethanol is crucial for the entire value chain going ahead. Lastly, we would also discuss the financial performance of rated clients, the rating dispersion, and share our outlook on the industry. My colleagues Gaurav and Ravleen would take you through this presentation. May I now please request Ravleen to take it forward from here?
Thank you, Debal. Let us begin with a brief overview. India had remained the second largest producer of sugar in the world after Brazil for a very long time and used to produce nearly 15 to 18% of the global sugar production. And it also was amongst the largest consumer. However, with India producing 33 million tons into sugar season 18-19, it became the world's largest sugar producing country, overtaking Brazil. As we all can see in the graph, where we have listed the 10 largest sugar producers globally, India produced nearly 33.16 million tons in 1819 in the global total of approximately 179.89 million tons. As we all know, sugar industry is a vital agro-based industry that impacts rural livelihood of about 50 million sugarcane farmers and numerous workers who are directly employed in sugar mills. Further employment is additionally generated in varied related activities like transport, trade services of machinery, and supply of agricultural inputs. Today, Indian sugar's industry annual output is approximately 80,000 crores, and as on March 19, there were 742 installed sugar factories in the country with sufficient crushing capacity to produce 34.3 million tons of sugar. States, namely UP, Maharashtra, and Karnataka, as we all know, contribute approximately 75 to 80% of India's sugar production. Moving on to the production and consumption trends in the Indian sugar industry, let us quickly understand the demand and supply scenario in this industry. For the benefit of people who don't track the sector regularly, historically the Indian sugar industry was considered as a cyclical industry. Earlier, when sugarcane arrears by the sugar mills increased at the time of glut in sugar production, farmers then used to switch to other crops. However, later post like 2012, state advised prices, or SAP as we all know, by UP government increased significantly, making sugarcane the most remunerative crop for farmers as compared to paddy or wheat. So sugarcane farmers as a result become accommodative even to the delays in the payment by the sugar mills till the payments are ensured, and hence the production of sugarcane and sugar stabilized in UP. So post 2012 and 13, if the sugar production has declined in the country, it's only because in the southern, like Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, or the western states in India, which are largely dependent on rainfall for sugarcane production. UP has sufficient groundwater availability, and hence sugar production in UP is largely unaffected due to the monsoons. As we all can see in the first graph, that India generally produces more than its demand for consumption of sugar. However, drought and inadequate rainfall in Maharashtra and Karnataka consecutively for 3 years led in a steep fall in production in sugar season 17. Nevertheless, a robust monsoon in 2017 resulted in a trend reversal with a massive jump in planting and with satisfactory rainfall in key producing areas, and also because of the increased sugar recovery rates, India moved to a surplus of 14.58 million tons in sugar season 19. So India produced like a record high of 33 million tons in sugar season 19, and this was the second consecutive year when production surpassed the 31 or 32 million ton mark compared to the domestic consumption, which we all know is like muted around 25 to 26 million tons. So according to ISMA's recent expectation of the sugar production in sugar season 19-20, it is expected that due to the lack of availability of water in Maharashtra and Karnataka, the sugar production would be like 26.5 million tons, which is almost like 20% down as compared to the production in sugar season 18-19. Further, due to COVID-19, there are concerns that the sugar industry might also experience a fall in the sugar consumption. There are temporary disruptions in the supply chain which have been experienced by the millers in the past few weeks. And also there could be a drop in the consumption levels from the usuals of 25 to 26 million tons, as there are curbs on social gatherings, celebrations, weddings. People are also avoiding cold drinks and ice creams to avoid falling sick. So all this might have an impact on the annual sugar consumption. Further, our next graph on this slide itself will help you understand the actual production so far in the current season. As against the expected production of 26.5 million tons in the first 5 months, which is October 19 to February 20th, there is a degrowth in the production by almost 22% to 19.48 million tons, as against we all can see that it was 24.93 million tons in the similar period last season. So this lower production, as can be seen in the graph, is primarily due to the lower contribution by Maharashtra owing to lower sugar output on account of damaged crops due to floods over there. Maharashtra will produce a significantly lower quantity this year as compared to what was produced last year. So let us now take a look at the position of the stock in India, and the estimation of the stock India is expected to close by the end of the current season. After posting like a record high sugar production for these 2 consecutive years, which I just talked about, which are primarily led by the higher acreage and yield in crops in UP, Maharashtra and Karnataka, and with no major change in the consumption patterns, which were muted at 25 to 26 million tons, inventory levels per and stood high at like 14.58 million tons. Now, the sugar production, however, is expected to fall to 26.5 metric ton this sugar season, which is roughly equivalent to the annual consumption. So one can expect that there will be a decline in the high inventory levels. The season started with a balance of 14.58 million tons in October 19. By clubbing our estimation, which is roughly equivalent to 26.5 million tons, the availability of sugar would be somewhere around 41 million tons. Now, against this availability, the consumption, which estimated at 26 million ton, and even after consuming a 6 million ton of exports, India is likely to end with a closing stock of 9.1 million tons of sugar in September 20, which is almost equivalent to 4 to 5 months of sugar consumption. Government has announced that it will provide an export subsidy of 10.45 per kg and has also provided an export quota of 6 million ton for sugar year 20. And we'll talk about these measures a little detail in the later part of our webinar. So as we all know, sugar prices are sensitive to demand and supply scenario. Let us take a look at the price trend. Moving in tandem with the production and consumption scenarios in the country, the average sugar price touched a low in sugar season 14-15 due to rise in sugar production, and it averaged higher in sugar season 15-16 and even 16-17, as we all can see in the graph, on a year-to-year basis on account of lower sugar production in the country. Now, if we see, prices, however, declined sharply by May 2018, and they touched almost rupees 27 per kg levels on account of a significant surplus in sugar season 18. Early start of the crushing season was also one of the reasons in UP, and also the fear of a significant sugar production increase in sugar season 19, which ultimately happened also. So government resorted to a lot of initiatives due to which price improved and have maintained at that level. Like generally in a high supply and inventory scenario, sugar prices, they fall, and they even so fall below the cost of production, which results in losses to these sugar millers. So what aided the sugar price in sugar season 19 to stay above the cost of production was the levy of the minimum support prices by government all throughout, and further the controlled supply by the government. We shall learn even about these measures a little detail later on. So we expected domestic prices to increase from the current levels in the near term, given the expectation of the lower production this year and government's minimum support prices, which is slated to continue, and even a focus on a higher export target. So given the current situation of COVID-19, which has put some pressure of sugars globally, exports and prices might see some impact on it. Moving on, let us have a look at the global sugar scenario, as the global patterns definitely have an impact on the domestic scenarios. The global consumption of sugar has been showing a rising trend on a consistent basis. On the other hand, as we all can see in the graph, global sugar production declined in sugar season 15-16, causing a global sugar deficit after 4 consecutive seasons of sugar surplus. However, in sugar season 17 and 18, there was a surge in the global sugar production due to higher sowing areas and increasing yields across major producing countries, primarily contributed by Brazil and India. Global sugar production is largely dependent on the production in Brazil, India, European Union, Thailand, and Australia. So according to United States Department of Agriculture, the global sugar production is forecasted down by around 3% year on year to approximately 174 million tons in sugar season 19-20. And on the other hand, global consumption is estimated to increase by 2% to approximately 177 million tons. Raw sugar prices in the international market, they remain muted at around 11 to 13 cents per pound in the last 1 year, after touching the multi-year low of 10 cents per pound. The fall in the prices can be attributed to higher production in Brazil and India. And with these low levels of global sugar prices, it was unviable to export the surplus from India, and hence the government resorted to export incentive schemes, increasing the import duty in the past, and etc. However, earlier, owing to the higher sugarcane diversion towards ethanol in Brazil this year and lower production in Thailand and European Union, it was expected that it would lead to a global deficit in 1920. And this even led to surge in global sugar prices, which have been hovering around 14.5 cents per pound since mid-Jan 2020. With the recent impact of the fall in the crude oil prices, and Brazil is expected to increase the sugar production. And there has been even an impact on the global sugar prices due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So all this might put some pressure in the medium term on the global prices. So what we would like to conclude after seeing the current domestic and global scenarios, that world is moving towards sugar deficit, with India expected to report a marginal surplus. And the scenario is well depicted in the graph as well, which is in front of you. The market fundamentals are changing because of the changing industry dynamics in three major producers, which is Brazil, India, and Thailand. Brazil is Brazil, all indicators point that sugar output is likely to be around 27 million ton, which is unchanged from the previous year. As is often the case, India's latest estimate suggests that sugar production for sugar season 20 would be around 26.5 million tons, which would decline by 7 million tons from the previous year. And further, sugar production in Thailand is expected to hit a low on account of the reduction in the cane area due to rising prices of cassava, which is relative to sugarcane over there. And even in the European Union, the sugar output is expected to stay at the previous year's low level only. So the world market has got into deficit route, and the impact on the prices could be seen till now. So moving on, as we've spoken about the prices, let us have a look at the trends in the SAP and FRP vis-a-vis the average ex-milk prices and how it impacts the millers. As we all know, the cane prices in India are determined through SAP or FRP depending upon the policy of the respective state. While the Commission for Agriculture Cost and Prices determines the FRP for sugarcane based on the cost of production, recovery, expected sugar price, intercrop parity, transportation cost, and few other factors, but it is not linked to the actual prices, which are determined by the market forces. In the same way, few states like UP, Tamil Nadu, Punjab, Haryana, and Uttarakhand, they determine their own SAP prices, which are also not linked to sugar recovery and are usually higher than the FRP. So the main problem with the approach of fixing SAP is that they are not linked with the sugar recovery or the output. And in the event of a higher sugar production leading to subdued prices, as was the case in sugar season 14-15 and even in the initial months of 15-16, higher SAP leads to accumulation of cane arrears. Similar is the case even in 17-18 and the same continued in 18-19. So FRP for the current sugar season is unchanged, which is at rupees 275 per quintal. And now with respect to UP also, which is the highest sugarcane producing state, SAP prices were rupees 315 per quintal for the current sugar season, similar to the last sugar season. Now it is evident that while SAP and FRP have been rising steadily, sugar prices have been volatile, reflecting the market conditions. The raw material side in India is controlled, where the revenue side is market determined, and this has distorted the Indian sugar industry in the past. So owing to the depressed domestic prices and higher cane cost, the cane areas mounted to an all-time high in sugar season 14 and in sugar season 15. And it is well depicted in the graph as well on your right-hand side. To ease out the situation and handle the distortion, government had to extend supports in the form of export-linked subsidy schemes, concessional soft loans, and interest subvention on the working capital loans, etc. to help the millers clear the dues. In the sugar season, when the sugar prices have been higher, the millers were able to settle their cane dues in a timely manner, as reflected by the low cane arrears for those years. And due to the windfall gains in sugar season 17, the millers were in a better shape and hence with better liquidity and availability of bank finance, and they were able to clear off the dues on time. However, financial health of sugar mills was affected owing to depressed sugar prices due to excess sugar production during 17-18, and the same resulted in accumulation of cane price arrears. International sugar market glut in sugar season 19, coupled with an export market squeeze and persistent domestic factors, have resulted in a buildup of sugarcane arrears even in sugar season 19. Despite the various government measures to bail out the sugar mills from their financial woes, the cane payment arrears stood at a record high of 28,000 crores in March 31, 2019. They have reduced to 15,000 crores by July 19 and have come down further to rupees 1,300 crores approximately in March 2020 with the better sugar prices. As directed by the government, mills have to pay to the farmers within 14 days of the receipt of the sugar cane. If they fail, the interest rate of 15% per annum is also charged to the mills. So, as we have been advising consistently in our last webinars, the current system of cane pricing should be done away with as it has lost its relevance, and adopting a rationalized cane pricing mechanism is the need of the hour. So from here on, I would request Gaurav to take us further from here.
Thank you, Ravleen, and a very good afternoon, everyone. As we all know, since February 2018, Government of India has taken several measures to protect the sector. In this slide, we have mentioned few important ones that have continued this sugar season and helped bailing the sector from the ill effects of the surplus. Now, we shall walk you through all of them in detail as we proceed, but let's take a quick snapshot of them in this slide. To help industry deal with this crisis of low sugar realization rates and help them clear their cane dues, government did extended support by fixing minimum sugar sale price at rupees 29 per kg in June 2018, and the same was raised to rupees 31 per kg in March 2019. The quantity restriction imposed on sale of sugar from June 2018 onwards, and same is being reviewed from time to time by the Government of India. Mill-wise, minimum indicative export quotas are fixed, keeping in view the high inventory levels with the sugar industry. Further, as we all know, overproduction led to a crash in prices, leading to poor liquidity, which resulted in cane arrears due. So it was decided by the central government that the carrying cost of the buffer stock will be reimbursed by them. Hence, the creation of buffer stock of 4 million tons, which was raised from 3 million tons in sugar season 19, was also announced. Government also extended soft loans to set up new distilleries and installation of boilers. Lastly, as we are aware, the government has approved the National Policy on Biofuels, which expands the scope of raw material for ethanol production beyond sugarcane molasses by allowing use of sugar-containing biomass such as sugarcane, sugar beet, etc., starch-containing materials such as corn, algae, etc. Post this, the government has also revised the price for ethanol, for which we shall learn in our upcoming slides. Usually, the government declares minimum support price for major crops in the country. Now, there is an unsustainable level of closing inventory, around 14.8 million tons in sugar season 19 on the back of bumper production in sugar season 18 and sugar season 19. In such a scenario where the supply was at all-time high, sugar prices would have fallen. But what supported sugar prices in spite of the highest level of inventory was setting up of the minimum support price by the government and controlled supply by the government. Minimum selling price for sugar millers for the first time was declared in June 2018 at rupees 29 per kg, which was further increased to rupees 31 per kg in February 2019. This implies that the sugar millers cannot sell below the MSP which has been declared by the government, and therefore the sugar prices had a floor after setting up of MSP, and companies are making a reasonable profit despite of huge surplus. Further, the mill-wise quota for selling sugar also helped regulating the supply of sugar in market and hence supported the prices. Companies who have completed their export quota are further given incentives in the way of additional quota to an extent of their monthly allocation. We can also see in the graph in the slide that the prices of sugar had crashed earlier as the inventory increased. However, the fall in prices was arrested once the minimum support price was declared. Now coming to the next slide, the government announced the MIEQ scheme to encourage export of sugar to reduce surplus in the country. Under the scheme, the industry was allowed to export 6 million tons of duty-free sugar in sugar season 1920. Production and transportation subsidy for the millers was declared by the central government with a condition to export proportionate quantities of sugar for millers. This subsidy was essentially introduced as the global prices were trading 20 to 30% below the cost of production for Indian millers, and exports seemed unviable without any support. With the recent uptick in global sugar prices and high incentive by the government, sugar export has become viable for Indian sugar producers. India is likely to achieve 80% of its allocated export quota for sugar season 1920, following the sharp rise in global sugar prices after the forecast of a global supply deficit. As per the latest data of the allocated quota, sugar mills have already cumulatively contracted for around 3.5 million tons and transported around 2.3 million tons out of their factories for exports. We believe the government still needs to continue these incentives as exports are vital for achieving the balance in the sector. As in spite of lower production this year, the inventories level continue to remain high, and with this COVID-19 crisis now looming large, the sector continues to need the support of the government. Considering the high level of inventories, the government had created a buffer stock of 3 million tons of sugar in 18-19, which was increased to 4 million tons in sugar season 19-20. This brought relief to sugar mills in terms of lower inventory storage cost. This would reduce the storage cost of sugar companies significantly and to improve the cash flow of millers, assisting them to clear the cane dues. Now coming to the much talked about ethanol blending program. Given the recent substantial increase in ethanol prices by the central government, ethanol has become significantly attractive for sugar mills and distilleries. However, current distillation capacity can meet only up to 6% blending, even after assuming entire distillation capacity for ethanol only, that is zero volume for industrial potable purpose. Current capacity of 3.5 billion liters is much less than the current requirement, which is around 5.11 billion liters to achieve a 10% blending. As a result, hurdle in EBP is limited distillery capacity, which produces ethanol, ENA and rectified spirits for oil marketing and liquor companies. Recognizing the constraint, the government announced a scheme in which it will bear interest subvention and also offer soft loans for companies wanting to create greenfield or brownfield ethanol capacity. While the capacity expansion, government has announced various measures. The mill owners shall, however, see the visibility for making such investments on the ethanol. This is where the pricing policy comes into picture. To give boost to ethanol vis-a-vis sugar, government did announce remunerative prices for different grades of ethanol. We all can see in the graph below the prices announced by the government for sugar season 19 and 20. Moving on, while we all know that a lot of measures have been taken by the government to make sure there exists a vibrant ethanol sector, let us quickly take a look at the ethanol story so far. Under the National Biofuel Policy introduced by the government in 2018, OMCs are advised to prioritize ethanol produced in the order, which is 100% sugarcane juice, second B heavy molasses or partial sugarcane juice, and third is C heavy molasses, and the fourth, which is the last, comes from damaged food grains or other sources. The central government has scaled up the blending targets from 5% to 10% under the EBP. The ethanol procured by the public sector oil marketing companies had increased from 38 crore liters of ethanol supply year 2013-14 to estimated 188 crore liters in 2018-19. At 188 crore liters of ethanol, the blending would be around 6.2%, which is higher than the earlier years, however lesser than the targeted by government. In the first tender, which was floated by the OMCs for sugar season 19-20 to 5.11 billion liters, which is almost 55% higher than what was floated in last sugar season. Against this, mills contracted to supply only 1.56 liters in the first tender. Then a second tender was also floated of 2.53 billion liters in January 2020 to supply for a period between February to November 2020. What we learned so far from all this, while government is showing support in the form of increased ethanol prices for different grades of ethanol, and there is also enough feedstock in the country to produce the same and meet the blending targets. What, however, missing is the capacity. Government has shown support even in the form of extending packages for making soft loans available to the industry, but the progress so far is not very impressive. As per the industry reports, 417 applications were received across the country once the relief package was announced by the government last year. Some 360 got in principal approval and less than 100, approximately 95 to 96, approached banks, while around 55 to 58 received the sanctions. There have been cases wherein the banks refuse loan to the miller as they have unhealthy balance sheets. Looking at these issues, government is intervening and has asked for the details from the mills and even ISMA regarding the issues they have been facing in getting the loan amount from the banks. Ethanol has become very important in the sugar value chain, and its sustenance is critical for ensuring a healthy sugar sector. This is demonstrated very clearly in our next slide. In the current scenario of sufficient production of sugar and high inventories, it is a win-win situation to produce as much of ethanol as possible for India and Brazil and simultaneously lower the production of sugar. It is exactly what Brazil had done when the crude prices had skyrocketed over the past few decades. However, with crude prices now tanking, it is critical that the measures to blend ethanol are not abandoned and the capacities to produce ethanol are created. This basically is ethanol blending is economically viable, is a viable solution to reduce inventory and earnings for sugar millers. It also addresses supply side issues which the government has incentivized through the new capex. And government control has reduced on ethanol which is sold for fuel to OMCs. Now, the sugar sale is dependent upon the market conditions assured offtake in ethanol and timely payments. The taxes on ethanol by the government are lower than which those are on petrol, and hence it is a win-win for sugar mills and the OMCs. It is also a green fuel which aids in reducing pollution, conserve foreign exchange, and increase value addition in the sugar industry, enabling them to clear cane price areas for farmers. And the government has recently signed an MOU with Brazil for exchange of information on the production and sustainable use of biofuels, which is going to be beneficial for the sector going ahead. Let us see the challenges Indian sugar sector is facing and the way we can look forward on these challenges. In the wake of falling sugar prices of the year in the year of surplus sugar, sunset clause for sugar MSP was introduced in June 2018. If the government would not have done so, or if it decided to abolish this measure now, sugar prices can crash from the current levels, keeping in view the high inventory levels and sufficient production domestically. The crash in prices could have even lower than the cost of production. Hence, it is extremely crucial for the government to maintain the same until the inventory levels come down to around 6 to 7 million tons. Government has also recently introduced export subsidy as building up of ethanol capacities and diverting more sugarcane over there will take approximately 1 to 2 years to start making any material enough difference towards the surplus sugar production. So in the meanwhile, government is also introducing sugar export subsidy to make sure some surplus from the country is exported. Hence, continuation of the export subsidy is crucial for the sugar sector in India. Also, interest cost can increase due to additional working capital requirement to hold the high inventories if the surplus is not exported. The sector is definitely looking up to the government to protect interests of farmers and mill owners by resorting to various protectionist measures. Of the proposed measures, the impact has been limited so far. However, it has significantly curbed any further pressures on the margins of the miller and shall remain critical in the coming sugar season also. The most acute structural issue in the sector has been the non-linkage of the sugarcane prices to the end product realization, and the package introduced by the government last year is not addressing that at all. High cane cost of production along with supply-induced pricing pressure result in margin pressure for the millers. It is a saving grace for the mills as there has been no change in SAP and FRP last year. The cost of production, however, still continues to remain high. Higher cane prices incentivize farmers to keep sowing cane vis-a-vis other crops, which could increase supply pressure in the medium term. Sugar policy can be rationalized by adopting combination of revenue sharing formula and FRP, whichever is higher. Lastly, the sugar mills should also look forward to diversification of revenue through ethanol and other downstream products to provide cushion to their financial health in the adverse years of sugar segment. The benefits arising out of the increased ethanol production capacities will, however, accrue over the longer term, even if it has a limited role in addressing the current liquidity issue of millers. In order to tap the potential and achieve the target of ethanol blending and cogeneration, sugar industry needs to upgrade its technologies and create capacities for cogeneration and ethanol production. Now, coming to the financial performance of the sector, let us see how the sugar production and consumption patterns, along with trend in sugar prices, have an impact on the operating performance of Indian sugar companies. As we can see, the sugar companies have seen major improvement in their financial parameters in FY17, with the companies reporting significant improvement in their profitability and interest coverage indicators. With the improved bottom lines, a lot of sugar companies also reduced their debt levels and the overall gearing for the industry improved, as can be seen in the second graph. However, the supply side surprises in the domestic market exerted pressure on the prevailing prices and posed a serious threat to sustenance of the recovery in the credit metrics of the sugar mills in FY18. Even after the bumper sugar production in sugar season 18 and 19, the industry has been able to evade any losses, mainly due to government's decision of introducing MSP for sugar and also a monthly release quota mechanism. Moreover, government is also supporting industry with a favorable biofuel and export policy. Now let us also have a quick look at the performance of Indian sugar companies in H1 FY20. The profits of the sugar segment of sugar companies practically vanished in the current half year due to a double low of low sugar prices and high inventory holding cost and stiff sales release quota implemented by the government. Sugar millers were unwilling to offload sugar in the export markets even after the government offered a producer subsidy of rupees 7 to 8 per kg on sugar exports. This is because sugar prices in the international market were as low as rupees 20 per kg. As we all see in the graph below, the Indian sugar industry incurred net losses amounting to 3.98% of the income in September 2018 quarter compared to a net loss amounting to 2.5% of the income in September 2019 quarter. At the operating level, however, the industry stayed profitable and reported an increase in margin in comparison with the September 2018 quarter. However, the financial performance and consequently the credit metrics in the upcoming years will depend upon their ability to handle the key factors which are presented in the next slide. I will now request Ravleen to take over from here.
So the key factors which impact the credit profile of the sugar millers, let us quickly have a look at all of them. The first being the government policies. So the sugar industry is regulated extensively by the government. We all know that. So these policies influence cost through cane pricing and cane availability, and the government also controls import and export of sugar through imposition duty. So consequently, sugar companies do not have much control over the quantity and the quality or the cost of the sugar cane they produce or the quantity of the sugar they can even sell. So a sugar company's credit risk profile is vulnerable to government policies. The next being the demand and supply cycle. The sugar industry globally is cyclical in nature, and it is a typical cycle which is affected by the cane supply and sugar demand, though largely driven by the supply side dynamics. Higher production leads to increased availability of sugar, thereby resulting in the declined sugar prices. This leads to lower profitability for the companies and consequently delayed payment to the farmers. Due to the higher sugarcane arrears, the farmers then switch to other crops, which lead to a fall in the area under cultivation for sugar. This then leads to lower production and sugar availability, followed by higher sugar prices, leading to higher profitability and then hence lower arrears, and thus the cycle continues. So in India, sugar production used to follow a 3 to 5 year cycle. So, however, as we pointed out earlier also, that post 2012, SAP by the UP government is increased, significantly making sugarcane the most remunerative crop for the farmers. As we already told you that due to this, sugarcane farmers have become accommodative even to the delays. And so primarily, if there has been a fall in the sugarcane production, so the sugarcane production has stabilized in UP. So post 2012-13, sugar production has only fallen in the country in the southern and the western states itself. So the cyclicality of the Indian sugar industry is fully supply driven, as steady growth is observed in the sugar companies. And for determining the sugar supply situation for a given sugar season, along with sugar prices, CARE tracks and assesses factors like opening sugar stock levels, expected domestic sugar production for the upcoming season, the demand supply scenario globally, along with the prevailing global sugar prices, and further government's policies on export and import to and from India are also assessed. In addition, market position of the company is also critical. In the highly fragmented sugar industry, with organized and unorganized players, size is an important determinant of a company's market position. The size of an entity is measured in terms of its crushing capacity and also the level of the forward integration. Larger companies, if not highly leveraged, typically have greater ability to withstand the external shocks, better access to capital markets, and consequently tend to have stronger credit risk profile vis-a-vis small unorganized players. And entities which have dominant market position and larger capacities are considered favorable by CARE. Next factor is the integration. The sugar industry is forward integrated into ethanol and alcohol production from molasses and power cogeneration through bagasse. The integrated sugar mills generally exhibit higher degree of sustainability in cash flows and hence are viewed more favorably as they are in a stronger position to handle the volatility of the sector. Optimal utilization of byproducts such as molasses and bagasse enable the companies to capture the value across the production chain. Revenue from byproducts on an average ranges from 15 to 25% of the total revenue for the large sugar mills, and the percentage contribution from the byproducts to total operating profits is even higher. So fully integrated players are viewed more favorably from the credit perspective by CARE, as fully integrated models help the business to generate additional revenues and to partially mitigate the risk of fall in the profitability margins arising from the downturn of the sugar business. Further, in cases of integrated mills which sell power to state-owned discoms, CARE even evaluates the timely receipt of receivables from them by taking into account their past payment track record, credit rating of the state discoms, and their financial profile. Coming to the most important factor, which is the debt management. This is one important aspect for the sugar companies. Demand for sugar lasts throughout the year, and the cane production is, however, concentrated between September and April. Therefore, sugar producers have to efficiently manage their seasonal working capital requirements. Sugar companies need to have sufficient liquidity cushion at any point in time to meet both their operational expenses and even their debt obligations. In the years of surplus production, sugar companies have to resort to additional working capital borrowings in order to fund the high level of inventory which sugar entities are carrying if they are unable to dispose the excess stock due to like stock holding limits or monthly sales quotas imposed by the government, which leads to increase in its working capital intensity. High repayment obligations at the time when sugar companies are holding excess inventory can be a concerning cause, and hence effectively managing of the seasonal working capital requirements amidst the fluctuating prices in a regulated environment is a critical factor for all sugar companies which CARE analyzes. All these factors, as we just discussed, are the factors impacting the credit profile of the mill owners. Looking at the rating dispersion for the sector, a significant portion of the sugar companies continue to be in the sub-investment category. However, with government's focus on the agriculture sector, the performance of the sugar sector is expected to improve. With this, we are now opening the house for the questions. Dear participants, we will be taking a 2 minutes break before we come back to take your queries. Meanwhile, may I request the participants to key in their questions?
We have our first question from Karan. He is asking how can COVID-19 impact the sugar sector? Hi Karan, the spread of this pandemic rapidly across the world is impacting the global economy and taking a toll on almost all the sectors. Ravleen had already highlighted that due to COVID-19, there are concerns that the sugar industry might also experience a fall in sugar consumption. Temporary disruptions in the supply chain have already been experienced by the millers in the past few weeks, and there could be a significant drop in the consumption levels from the usual 25 to 26 million tons, as there are cults from social gatherings, celebrations, weddings, etc. People are also avoiding cold drinks and ice creams to avoid falling sick. In India, the beverage and the sweetener sector is the bulk consumer. All this will have an impact on the annual sugar consumption. Now, whether the impact will be significant or not, it is something we'll have to wait and watch. Further, international prices are down by around 20% in the last 2 weeks due to the impact of pandemic, COVID-19. This could be temporary, but one needs to wait and see, and how long it takes for it to actually come down.
Okay, the next question is from Sima, and the question is how the falling crude oil prices may impact the ethanol blending. Well, we all know that US crude and Brent have dropped significantly over the last few weeks, which is not merely because of the COVID-19 pandemic cutting of the demand, but also because of the output cuts by the OPEC countries. This may have a short-term impact on the ethanol blending. This is, however, a short-term view if we just talk about the current scenarios. We are talking about making Indian sugar sector something alike the Brazilian sector, The Brazilian mills have the flexibility to adjust their production plan between sugar and ethanol depending on the prices for these products. Like in the last 2 seasons, um, Brazilian mills have been producing more ethanol than sugar, as that was the one which was generating more returns. But with the current scenario, uh, when the crude is on a down cycle, Brazil is equipped to produce more sugar in the upcoming season. So while we talk about ethanol blending, we aspire that the Indian sugar industry also enjoys this product fungibility kind of a situation, and mills produce what is more remunerative to them at any point of time. Yep.
So we have the next question from Alpesh, and he's asking what are the parameters of rating. So as I just walked you briefly, probably the key factors which are impacting the credit profile. So I can summarize that once again for you. That is primarily the demand and cycle, probably the global and the Indian as well. What kind of measures government is offering for that particular sugar season is also very important. We also see like the size of an entity, how well it is integrated, whether it has the cogen or ethanol or like the distillery operations or not, and like the liquidity which is available with a particular entity, like the debt management policies. Also, he's asking that for 2-3 years, these mills were largely in loan default. So, how the credit rating is really helpful? Well, Alpesh, credit rating is the assessment of the credit worthiness of a particular entity. That's like the repaying capacity of a company, but which is pertinent to a particular debt which is being rated. Now, if we see that past 2-3 years, what have been we've been highlighting that whenever the FRP and the SAP prices have been higher than the sugar prices which were prevalent in the country. So we've been facing this structural issue where the prices are not linked to the demand and supply. So that's what we've been highlighting. So that is also one reason that the small mills which are not very well integrated and they are not having a vis-a-vis to the other large mills which are well integrated. In the times when sugar prices take a turn, then those mills particularly have losses. So particularly because of this thing, the sugar prices in the past, the small sugar entities in the past have had some kind of losses. But however, the credit rating is definitely very useful because credit rating, the parameters that one can analyze in a credit rating report is the financial risk profile of a particular company. And then one can even look after the liquidity section, which we give out in our press releases, which definitely will talk about the kind of accruals we are expecting from that particular sugar companies, versus the debt repayment capacity that they have, or whether the kind of the debt repayment that they have to do in upcoming 2 years. It would even talk about their working capital management and the capex plans. Yeah, thank you.
There's one question from Ankit. He's asking how many mills have got the loan disbursement under the government measures, and by when can the impact be seen in the ethanol? Now, government has shown support even in the form of extending packages for making soft loans available to the industry, but the progress so far is not very impressive. As per the latest information, Center had received around 417 applications across the country when the relief package was announced last year, and some 360 have got in principle approval and less than 100 have approached banks, and around 55 odd have received the sanctions. There have been cases when the banks have refused loan to the millers as they have unhealthy balance sheets. So government has now intervened and asked for details from the mills and ISMA regarding what kind of issues they have been facing in getting the loan amounts from the banks. But the process might take around 1 to 2 years before the results started coming up.
There's this question which has come up from Geeta where she's asking me, where do you see the global sugar prices in the near future? Well, it all depends on what will happen in Brazil and Thailand and even the rest of the world in the next season. It is still very early to stay and give a range. However, we are going to have a deficit of sugar, which are somewhat reflected in the prices, even if we see currently. But fundamentally talking, we don't expect to see the attractive prices like we saw, like 2-3 years back. But we should see some improvement due to the market fundamentals currently what we are in. So with this COVID-19 impact on the global crude oil prices falling, some impact could be seen in the medium term. But still, however, on a large scale, we see some improvement due to the market fundamentals would be there in the global sugar prices as well. I think that's all. So thanks again to all the participants for taking their time out and being a part of this Care Ratings webinar. We hope the discussion was insightful and look forward to your participation in future also. For any other queries or feedback or suggestions, please respond in the feedback mail, which will be coming to you once the webinar ends. Goodbye for now.